everybody, welcome to Keeping It Real. I'm Jay. Just coming in to make a video today for you. I want to talk about something that is plugging up my feed. It is burning up the airwaves and has everybody, seems like everybody talking on my social media on the Facebook and Twitter. And it's this concept of Métis identity. What does it mean to be Métis? Who's Métis? What makes someone Métis? Or what makes someone just mixed? What does it mean to be Métis versus non-status? Can there be Métis in the East? Can there be only Métis in the West? What does this mean? And it's an interesting topic, and I think there's a lot of people with some very invested opinions. We have a lot of people in universities and elders and people who've been around the block a lot longer than I have, throwing their hat in the ring and giving us their 2 cents on what that means to them. And I just wanted to come in and talk to you today a little bit from my perspective, what being Métis means. A lot of things that I hear to invalidate Métis identity is that you have to have recent Métis identity. So if you have an indigenous ancestor, let's say, that was 400 years ago. So, roughly if we're going to talk 400 years ago, what are we saying, 1700s? So if you're lucky enough to be in Canada and you can trace your genealogy back to the early 1700s to an indigenous ancestor, somehow that's seen as less than. So if you're from Ontario or Quebec or Nova Scotia or somewhere like that, and you have an indigenous ancestor, you can pinpoint 400 years ago. This is being used to say that that's not recent, it's not valid for Métis identity, and I find that kind of odd because that's not really how genealogy works. We all got here from somewhere. None of us just sprung up from the ground. We all have ancestors, and on my adoptive side, I'm Scottish, and I can trace my last name back 1,000 years in Scotland. I don't think that makes me Scottish simply because A, I'm adopted, and B, I wasn't born to that land. But that would give me, Scottish ancestry. So I don't understand what this means then, if I can trace that ancestry back 1,000 years. Isn't that then valid, or is that invalid? In identity, in claiming heritage. My indigenous ancestors come from the Potawatomi Nation, and so they've been here for 10,000 years. I can't pinpoint a specific ancestor back that far, but the reality is they've dwelled in these lands longer than Scottish people have been in Scotland. So I don't understand this concept that somehow if you have an ancestor that you can pinpoint 400 years ago, your identity as being a Métis person is not valid, or somehow less than. So if you can go back further in your genealogy than 1885 or 1850 or 1830, kudos to you that you have been able to make that leap. A lot of indigenous ancestry, of course, due to colonial record keeping, is very difficult to go past a certain degree. I mean, simply, we indigenous people didn't keep birth records, we don't keep baptism records, we don't have a lot of those same written documents. So the validity of that genealogy is a lot more recent in your oral traditions and oral stories than it would be through the paperwork by the colonial governments. But I don't see how that makes something valid or invalid. I don't see how you could say someone's Métis identity is invalid because their ancestor was born so long ago. Because if a father has a son and he raises that son, is the son less indigenous than the father? I'm not sure. And what if that son also has a son and raises a son? Is he less indigenous than his grandfather? And how many generations do we have to go then before we find out what is valid and not valid? Where's the cutoff? Is it 400 years from now? Is 400 years ago mean you're cut off now? Then it means if someone's born in being Métis now, in 200 years, 300 years, are they cut off? It boils down to this blood quotient idea. Métis people are part of the land, they're part of the tapestry of the land, and I think as long as you're born on the land and you live on the land, that's what makes you Métis. At the same time, I can honestly tell you that just because you have an indigenous ancestor does not make you Métis. Being Métis is about an identity, and that identity has to be something that's living, it's ongoing, and it's a present part of your life. I have ancestry that is Scottish, but I don't wear a kilt, I don't play the bagpipes, I don't speak Gaelic, I don't even speak Broad Scots. I've only tried haggis a few times. You know, I don't celebrate Robbie Burns Day or any of the other things that would be iconic to keeping my Scottish heritage alive here in Canada when I'm not even in Scotland. So that's the thing, is if you're Métis, it's about owning that identity and making that identity part of your living experience today. And I think that's what it boils down to for me. Being Métis is much more than your genealogy. While that genealogy is important, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's only the starting point in claiming that identity and asserting that identity. But that is not being Métis in a nutshell. It has to be more. Because what makes an ongoing living culture that we're going to be able to hand down to our generations that come after us has to be more than who our ancestors were. We have to be those ancestors that be able to hand down those traditions, that culture, and that language. So that's my two shakes, my two stakes, my 2 cents on what it means to be Métis and Métis ancestry. And until next time, keep it real.